Hello and welcome to Intuitive Clarifications with Natasha. And as every week, every third Wednesday of the month, that Regan is planning on being here, and I'm just so grateful for that. And today he's going to be really my guest, because we usually
Yeah,
have discussions back and forth. And I know a lot of what he's talking about, but I'm going to let him kind of discuss it in his way that he wants to, and it's the 7 stages of the afterlife. And and it's amazing how we all are finding out about this stuff, and I really would like to let him have that story about it so that he can describe what he knows, because I've known a lot of things since I was born, even about the afterlife. But at the same time, though, there's those realities that we're all wondering as humans, about things. So Regan, who
hi,
does hypnotherapist through the Newton Institute, and he studied under Dolores Cannon, and Veronica says hi. And
hey Veronica.
you are at a conference here, and you've taken the time. Paula Sheehan says hi, and hi, Paula. Hello, everyone that's watching. And you're at a conference, so you decided to take time out for this, and I'm so grateful for that. We could have postponed it another week like we did last month, but it's like, why not? So
Yeah,
you're here, and hi,
hi. Good to see you. I can't. I say this every time, but I mean, it seems like it was just last week that I was, and like a month went by and just like that quick. Um, and I know they say time's speeding up in a way that, what used to be a year is now like 6 months or whatever. I mean,
Regan.
it's. I think we're all kind of feeling that and everything. And I think from this research we've been doing on the afterlife and what it's like over there, um, that it kind of makes sense because we're getting is this new change in the or new consciousness is kind of coming to the earth in a way that the space between here and there is going to be a lot thinner, so people will have a lot more contact, and that's good because there's so many new mediums out there right now, and there's schools. I don't know if you know the name of this school, Natasha, if you've heard of it. I wish I could have to call my client and ask what it is, but she just did 1,100 free readings for people, and it's this um, organization that's trying to create a 500,000 mediums by the year 2050. So they're training people that think they have this ability, that they think,
Mhm.
I might, like you knew yours when you were a young person, right?
Yeah.
And some people just later on they go, wow, I'm kind of psychic. Well, they have schools and things now and ways of training people to develop, which may be some of these innate abilities that people have. So
Well, I can
what?
tell you that when we go through grief, a lot of times those doorways open up
Yeah.
once we
Well,
get on the other side of it. And sometimes we don't get the message from our loved ones, but we get the message. We're just starting to, know that it's like, why is so and so talking to me? But yet my husband won't talk to me, who just
yeah.
passed, or, it's like that kind of thing. But it's just once you start getting into this understanding of another dimension, then, we just start trusting that
Yeah, a
sense.
lot of my clients, well, let me start by saying I'll give a background to all this. Um, the Newton Institute is an institute that was started by Michael Newton about 15 years ago now. Um, he accidentally discovered this way to allow people to visit the afterlife without having a near-death experience. It's kind
Hmm.
of the same thing, but there's no death part, which is great. And it's an easy, safe way. It's about 90% successful, which means it's something naturally we can do if you get, have a facilitator there to help facilitate you having the experience.
Yes.
And we've helped about 70,000 people to go to the afterlife and back, which they spend hours there. But as researchers, we keep pushing the boundaries, and while they're there, we keep saying, well, ask them about this, ask them about that. We're curious, what's it like in the afterlife or heaven, whatever the name, people have for it, the place we go when we leave this physical body, that we
Yes.
go back to. And we keep compiling lots of information. So I thought what I'd do today is talk about the 7 stations. They're like, we call them stations, different places that are in the afterlife that found that souls, when you're there, are places that you experience over there. Um, so this process is easy. It's uh, life altering for most people because when you have this experience of seeing where you go when you die, uh, all of a sudden you don't have any doubts. You don't have that little, even
Mhm.
1% doubt that there is an afterlife, because even people that are believers are still a little bit, they wonder, I wonder if I'm just, all this is hokey pokey, you know, and maybe there's nothing beyond this world, you know. So you get confirmation that, yep, it's all real. You
Yep.
also get confirmation that, like these guides that talk through Natasha, that she has contact with the Archangel Michael and all the others. She's got a whole list of them over there.
That I, yeah.
Yeah, you find out that they're real because you, when you have this experience, you get to go face to face with your guide or angel, get to know their names. You get to see what they look like or how they're appearing to you, what they want you to see them as I would
Yeah,
say.
because we all have them,
Yeah,
and they're so close to us, and they
yeah,
support us all the time. And if we can't hear them physically, they'll do it in ways of putting things in front of us,
yeah. I know a lot
and
of times.
experiences like synchronicities. Like my
Yeah,
husband says, "How did you get that parking spot?"
yeah.
I go,
Somebody.
I just get it, or
Yeah,
sometimes if I don't get one, it's there's a purpose for it, right?
yeah. The guides will tell you. They say, "Look, I've been with you ever since, you know, for many lifetimes, but in this lifetime, since the second you were born, I've just been waiting for you to wake up to remember that
Mhm.
I'm up here watching out for you." And what's beautiful is that once you wake up to that, then now you have this benefit of being more open to what your guides are trying to, you know, to help you with, you know, because we have free will and everything down there. And so we make our own choices on everything. But a lot of times, like having a good life coach, they're kind of in the periphery saying, you know, maybe it'll be good if you do this. What do you think? You know, and then we have to choose, do we want to do that or follow their advice or whatever? So here's what happens. I'll start with um, in these sessions, you know, the stations that most people go to. And the first thing is we know pretty much what happens when your physical body dies. You know, most people are out of their body. They hang around for a while. You know, a lot of them, you know, some advanced souls just go zip, right back to the afterlife, but most souls hang around for a little while. And, you know, they get to see their funeral. Uh, so many times we've heard this, and people, they kind of, when you're going at a funeral and people say, "Oh, I can feel grandpa's here," or,
Yep.
you know, or whatever, and people are saying that,
And 99% of the time that they're there.
it's right, it's true. And
Oh,
that's,
funerals are interesting for me.
yeah,
Whew.
because when I'm taking people through this process and they go to a past life, they see them pass away, they're above watching their funeral. And then at some point, I ask them, "Are you ready to go back home, you know, to the afterlife, or do you need to stay around for a little bit to comfort people that are grieving?" And
Mhm.
I would say about a third to fourth of the time, oh no, maybe it's more like a third to half the time, they'll say, "No, my daughter or so is grieving over me so bad, I want to stay around for a little while." So that I'm quiet a little bit, and I'll say, "Well, go do your thing, and then when you're done, speak up and let me know what you did." And so we know a lot of different ways now, and which Natasha, you know, as far as the way they connect with us on the other side. And one of the ways is through mediums. You know,
Uh-huh.
they know when people go to a medium that, and if their daughter or whoever's there that wants to talk to them, they just somehow instantly know when that channel's open, you know, like they're just there, you know, right?
Yep. Oh,
Natasha, you know, like you can
oh,
call on
exactly. Like
anybody.
I was at a cemetery at a funeral for my coworker friend coworker. I love her so much. And her son passed away. And he was the same age as my kids.
Yeah.
He was, just barely over 30. And as I'm standing there, there's another coworker, now she's retired, that her son who committed suicide was talking to me as we're at this other service, and the son that we're burying is talking to me at the same time, and I'm like going, okay, this one, the friend that I was standing next to, that passed away 2 years ago, you're going to have to wait until after the service because I have to honor this moment that's in front of me.
Yeah.
And then after that, I let the one that passed away write recently, communicate and that kind of stuff. And he's been talking to me. Actually, I have a message that I got to give to his mom. And I told her, when you're ready.
Yeah.
She knows me. But she, and so then after that, after my friend was bringing me home, that, I was finally able to give the message from the son that committed suicide 2 years ago, and
Yeah.
so, it's like, when you're in that moment, it's all you can. I love giving messages, though. I give so many, like that client of yours gave over, I don't know how many messages I've given away,
Yeah.
to loved ones.
I know. And so mediums is one way for people that don't believe in mediums yet, but they believe dreams sometimes. The most common way that they say that they contact the loved ones is through a dream state, because when you're in a dream state, you're in an altered state. You're like in a hypnotic state in a way. And your monkey mind is kind of out of the way a little bit, and you're more receptive. And everybody listening's probably had the experience themselves, or they know someone who said, wow, my mom who just passed away, she was in my dream last night and she was just smiling and waving at me, and I just knew it was her, and it made me know that she's okay, that she's not dead, she's just in another form right now, and a third way, I'll give an example of one. This husband and wife, the man passed away. The wife, they'd been married for like 50 years, and she was so grieving. He used to have this thing he would do when she'd read a book in her favorite chair all the time. He would walk up behind her and blow on the back of her ear, this and she goes, like this. So when the client, I said, this wasn't me, but it's another therapist that told me about this, says, the client says, well, what I did is that she's sitting in her chair and she's crying over me. She's not even reading a book. She's just sitting in that chair and everything. And he says, I tried to use all of my soul energy or something, and I kept standing behind her, kept blowing on the back of her ear. And all of a sudden she's in the chair and she goes, like, Robert, you're here, aren't you? You're here.
Yeah.
And then he says, then I was okay. Now I can go back home. So he just had to do that little bit. So they want us to know that they're okay. They hate to see us kind of having to grieve and go through all that pain when they're okay. They just change forms, So
exactly.
Once that happens, then I ask my clients, I'll say, well, are you ready to go home? And they'll go, yes. And I'll say, well, let's rise above the earth a little bit until they can see in great distances. And then I'll say, now, there was a point that you have the memory of this. There was a point when someone was there to greet you, to take you back to the afterlife. And so I say, just kind of, now look around, who's there? And almost immediately, most of them go, oh, my guide's here. Or they'll go, oh, there's this shining ball of blue energy right here. And I'll say, well, let's find out if that's your guide. And I'll say, just go over to the ball of energy and just say, hey, are you my guide? And the guide, usually this energy form, which is what we are in our true selves, will say, yes. And we'll ask for a name. A lot of times we get a name. Sometimes they just make up a name. They say, well, you can just call me this for today,
Yeah, we're attached to names. They're not.
No, they'll say sometimes. He says, well, if you need to call me something, okay. But over here, we don't need names, kind of like. But so anyway, now, so the first station is once they leave the body, that we've discovered is a place of rejuvenation. And it seems to be where souls go sometimes when they've had a rough time of it in the physical body. And God allows them to go to this place in a sense to be refurbished, to be, to really deprogram or to, to de-escalate.
Dehumanize. It's that dehumanizing.
Yeah. So you can get back into spirit form. And what's beautiful about that is when my clients we ask the guide, says, well, can we go to a place of rejuvenation? Every single time they say yes. And then as we say that, boom, they're there. It just happens like in an instant. And so then we're researching. We always say, are you inside or outside? Most of the time it's outside. Sometimes I was recently had one, they were in a cave, and it was a crystal cave. and there was all kinds of light coming from above into these crystals, and the healing light was coming through the crystals, all just into them,
Mhm.
and they could just feel their body just, being reprogrammed or, fixed. But most of the time it's outside, and it's some beautiful setting, with waterfalls. Some like water is a lot of times in this scenario, So
Yeah.
I'll tell my clients, I said, well, your guide there will take you through the process of rejuvenation. And I'm just going to be quiet for a little bit, and you just experience it. And then when you're done, speak up and tell me what you went through, so we have it on the recording, because we record all this. So most of the time it's something to do with water. One of the times she said it was a waterfall, and she'll describe the waterfall, but the waterfall was just pure light. It was all different colored lights, like she's standing in a shower of light. It was coming down through her. And then she could see like a river. You could see the light going, and then in the far distance it just disappeared, kind of thing. Um, but their experience when they're talking in the human form, they say, whoa, it said, one person said, it felt like I had a million little BBs in me, and I could feel each one of them being cleaned, you know, and it was that sort of thing. And a few times they go, I don't want to leave here. This is like being in a heavenly spa, it's great. So once that's complete, but here's the good thing about that too. Because there's no time and space, my client is standing there, but right next to them is that person who they were in that past life.
Mhm.
So because and then I've had sometimes their younger selves that have had abuse and things like that. We'll ask the guide if her younger self can show up, and boom, there's their 5-year-old self or 8-year-old self. And it's when they're in this state, it's totally natural. They don't question it at all. It's just happening. So there's their past self, their current self, who they are, and their current self, who they were when they were a child, all together in one place, and they all have this place of
Of
rejuvenation.
rejuvenation.
Yeah. And then once that person who they were in that past life is rejuvenated, then my client will give them a hug, and because they know they're the same soul, we'll go on to back up to the afterlife, and then we ask the guide, can we now concentrate on who my client is now, because they have certain uh, questions, they have certain roadblocks in their life, and things they want to understand. And so
Mhm.
we'll ask the guide, then can we go to the second station? And there's a choice. They can either go to a council to get questions answered that they pre-prepare ahead of time for their session, or they can go to a soul group. And the soul group are souls that you kind of your best buddies in heaven, the best
Mhm.
buddies in afterlife, souls you've probably been with many times, and you've just formed beautiful connections with. And those are the souls that generally are in your life. They end up being your mom and your dad, or your kids, or your soulmate. you know
Mhm.
um, and so we'll ask, what's better for them, go to the soul group first, or the council. And it's about 50-50. So whatever they say. So for instance, they say, let's go to the council. Instantly, it's just happened. That's what's so neat about down here to manifest, Natasha. And we know it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time,
Well, because we're the 3D body. We're
right,
we're
we're in a
we're
3D
kind of
body.
we're the slugs and the worms and the
Yeah,
of the society. But I want to take this moment, if I can, because we've
yeah,
had a couple people popping in that
yeah,
we're having a discussion with Regan Forston, who is a hypnotherapist, and he's talking about the 7 stages or the steps of
there's
of the afterlife, and
yeah,
I wanted to get his perspective as someone who sees it from the hypnotic side, because I know it from my side,
yeah,
but it's like it's interesting to hear it from the what you're witnessing it to be. And so if you're new coming in, I just want you, and if you know somebody who can really use this conversation, please share and like this conversation, because there's a lot of people who are grieving right now. Whew, there's a lot of people grieving right now.
yeah,
And so with that, and I know at least 10 of them right around me, that it's like, if you know somebody who can use this conversation, please share it, because Regan and I both really want to just support and help people through this world
yes,
of, of just bringing light and love to this planet.
yeah.
So Regan, thank you very much. So
Oh yeah,
we're at the second
thanks for
stage.
saying that. Well, and two, there's another podcast that we can recommend to people that are grieving. It's called Grief to Grow. And I don't know if it's the number 2. I think it's grief. And I think but if you just go Grief to Grow, and it's people going through grief, and it's nice to have kind of a support kind of podcast. It's about talking about what people are going through.
Yeah, I'm gonna reach out and see if I can. If
you would be great on there.
And I'm gonna see if I can be on that podcast.
Yeah, I think I sent you the information on that. Yeah. So I just did I think 9 sessions from people that listened to me on the show that are going through grief, and I'll have to tell you there were 9 of the most best, I guess, I don't know, best sessions I've done, and I think that's because of the people being in the stage. They're so vulnerable, and their hearts are so open that they're so ready to just find out, to get a bigger understanding and to make sure their loved ones are okay. And it was just great, the session. And these sessions could be done online, which is crazy, it seems to some people, but we do them in person or online. And online, we found that we started doing this during COVID, and we found out that we're still about 90% successful just doing it on there. Now, like I mentioned, with Natasha's been doing stuff online, even in phone calls with people, right?
Yep.
I mean, because there's no time and space in a sense when you get into this, kind of realm. So like Natasha can do sessions for you online or Zoom or in person if you're around her area, and the same with me.
Yeah.
So it's allowed us now to open this beautiful experience for people to have anywhere in the world, which is really great. Okay, so the second stage in this case I'm talking about was where a client would go to the council. Now, and I've done hundreds of these now, and every single person has had a counsel, and it's usually or always unique to them. It seems to be these council members are on there that know your story. They know all about you. They know what you need. They know, what you've been struggling with. There's never, ever any kind of condemnation, never anything but love that you get from these counselors, which makes, because some people are afraid to do a session because they go, man, I really messed up. I got done some pretty bad things.
Yeah, I know. Judgment. Oh, but no. It's all love. It's all
just
love.
all love. It's all love. Yes. And they know the issues you've done with. And the one thing that they will tell you, if you're beating yourself up about some bad decisions you made in your life and you've done some negative, bad things, is they'll tell you, like, we want you to get over that. And the way we want you to do that is to begin to forgive yourself, and get more with the self-love, realize that you're just a soul that's learning, and you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail before your success. Yeah. So the council, what people do before a session, they write down all the questions they want to ask. And it's, generally speaking, the main thing they want to know is, what the heck was I thinking when I decided to be incarnated in a physical body? I'm being a little silly about that, but because they kind of know what they're getting into. And many people have done it hundreds of times, different lifetimes. But they want to find out, what's my mission? Why am I here? Why am I having these difficulties? And they're happy to give you clarity on those things, about what your mission is. Now, most people are going to find out that they're in the middle of their mission. Sometimes they think, well, I feel so lost, but then when they find out what their mission is, they go, oh, wow, yeah, I guess I am in the middle of it, but a lot of us, or a lot of people, have gotten off track a little bit because of, making wrong decisions, and because of, we have free will,
being distracted by the real life.
Right. Yeah. Because souls come down with a plan. This is what we're going to do. And then because of all the things that happen in their life, sometimes they can get off track a little bit. And if they are, they'll give you advice about how to get back on track. And to give you more clarity in what your mission is, so that you kind of, get to work on that. But people ask about, it's so common for people that are looking for that one soul that they can kind of be with, the soulmate, or someone who they can feel, fulfilled or something. Everybody's looking for that one special person. And some people have had not so much, not that good of luck in their life, and they just, we're meant to be with other people, You know, we're meant
Mhm.
to help each other and that, you know, and a lot of times they'll give you some specific, uh, they'll give you some specific things. Sometimes they'll say, we see someone in your future, but we can't tell you when or who or why, because we don't want to spoil the surprise in a sense, because it'll happen naturally. But I've had a few where they said, um, you came down on this life and that wasn't part of that
Your
wasn't part of
story.
what you planned to do. Yeah, you came down here. And when they find that out, I'm thinking of one client in particular, she came down just to really work on herself. In other
Mhm.
words, if she'd had children, if she'd had all this interaction, other things, she couldn't have really concentrated on really learning, growing spiritually in a sense. So it was just a time to, like, time out, everybody. I'm going to come down here by myself. I'm going to really concentrate on myself, So that made her, then she goes, now it makes sense, because she was feeling bad because society was kind of saying, oh, why aren't you married? Why don't you have children and all that? And uh, that was bothering her, that she thought you know, she was, uh, she felt ruled by societal influences instead of, being herself. So that relieved her a lot. So um, once all the questions are answered, what I've been doing lately is I'll say, well, may my client have the experience of meeting her higher self face to face. They always say yes, and then there's your higher self standing right in front of you. And
That's
oh
pretty
my gosh,
awe-inspiring, isn't it?
oh man, I'll tell you, yeah. And I'll say to the clients, I'll say, describe yourself. What color? And a lot of times they'll say, oh, I'm purples and blues, and
Mhm.
but they, in that state, that's you, that's
Yeah,
yourself.
exactly.
And then we begin talking to the higher self. I'll ask my clients, I'll say, can I have permission to talk directly to your higher self? They always say yes. And then all of a sudden, out of their mouths, speaking is the higher self,
Mhm.
So I'll say to the higher self, I said, how are you happy with the progress that your lower self has made, from what you planned on doing? And they'll most of the time they'll say, yeah, I'm pretty happy. But then I'll say, is there something that you would like to see them do more of? And a lot of times you get this wisdom from the higher self that'll say, I think they need to spend more time in meditation, or you know what, they need to get out and exercise because they're letting their physical body, they're not taking care of it like they should. They need to change their eating habits. And one of them said she needs to stop being so stubborn. It was like, just, and so what's interesting, when people listen to the tape and they hear their higher selves,
Yeah.
telling them this stuff, it really sinks in. They go, wow. So then I asked the higher self, can the lower self walk into you to feel what it feels like to be whole? When you're back to your whole self. The higher
And we're
self
not
always,
small.
ooh, no,
We
my
all think that we're the
gosh,
small little human, and we
yeah,
are definitely free from that journey. We
yeah,
believe that we're small. We are not.
no. And that's, some people say that was worth the price of admission, just doing that, because all of a sudden people will say, I don't have any problems, I know the answers to everything. I mean, it's that feeling of just,
And if
so what
you
I
don't, they'll come.
yeah,
It's that trust that if you don't know the answer, it will come. And
it'll come.
it's like there, and it's like you can have worry. It's a different kind of worry, though. It's just a different kind of understanding. It's a different kind of, because people always go, how do you not worry about that? I
Yeah,
just know it's gonna come. I don't know what's gonna come. I just know that it's gonna work out, and I just gonna trust that process.
I know. And that's good. My wife Patty's so good about that, connecting with the higher self. She always says, everything always goes my way, everything always
Mhm.
goes my way, everything always works out. And I watch as she's in the middle of so many crazy things and they just work out. And she
Yeah,
just,
they
well,
do.
yeah, because I just expect it to, so that's really being in touch with the higher self. So
Exactly, and then sometimes, like, when we were at the airport, and it was Christmas time, and there was hardly any car. We were in Florida, any cars to rent, and I just stood there and I told my husband, "Let's wait. Which one looks more right for us to go to?" And I said, go to that one, honey, and I'll just stay here in line and wait for the next one. He walked over. We got a better car. We got a better situation. We got a better knowing,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
you
Yeah,
know.
that's
And
that's
so,
good.
but we're getting down on time. We've only got half an hour, and we're
Okay.
only on stage 3.
Well, if we don't get to the others, we'll cover those in another show or something, because
Exactly.
there's so much about the others that way. But I just want people to know out there that are listening that, since the whole world is evolving into us being closer to the other side. And everybody says now that this, what they call the Kali Yuga or something, which has been going on for, I don't know, 40,000 years or something, is pretty much ending now. And that's the period of the cycle that we go through where there's more fear, there's more hatred, there's more of that in the world. And we're heading into the new cycle, which is about love and peace and kindness. And that it's like when when the Christians talk about the new earth, in a sense, that when Jesus comes, and then people are going to live peacefully on earth for a whole lot of years. And I used to know all that stuff, but I don't remember all the particulars now. But it's the same kind of thing, but it's just they're talking about it in a different way when it's happening mostly metaphysical, more than in the physical world. But so once they get all their questions answered there, then I'll usually ask, should my client have asked certain questions that they didn't? And they'll usually give some, well, maybe she needs to know about this, because sometimes we just don't see the whole picture of what we should have been asking, or they'll give some parting advice. And then I'll say, my client has some health issues that we want to discuss. Can we have her higher self do like a body scan for my client, or do you have a health person here? Most of the time they say, well, we have someone here. And then instantly there's a guide or a health person in front of my client, and we'll talk to them, get their name, and then we'll start discussing my client's health issues. And the first thing that I'll ask is, can you tell my client why she has her health issue? And that is so inspire, so you really get to see, or the clients get to see, and most of the time, how they've made themselves sick. When we were talking about that in one show, right, Natasha, how different problems, if we have trouble with forgiveness or something, it shows up in one part of our body, and that. So then we ask, can this process be reversed? And a lot of times they will say, yes, it can be reversed, but you have some work to do, and it has to do a lot of times with not enough self-love. It has to do with, maybe they're holding anger or some sort of hatred for somebody in their life. Sometimes it's just that they've not taken care of the physical body correctly. They're just eating all junk, and they're ruining this vehicle that we have that's supposed to be sacred, So
and I'm going to add in another one that it could be, because I know my nut allergy that I have is stemming from a very pivotal point in my relationship with my husband.
Yeah.
And how his mirroring a situation mirrored so many other situations in my life from before him. And it was one of those moments where my body just says, I'm done dealing with this. And this is how I'm going to express that stress, that cortisol moment, that fear and flight, and so since I've been healing that, I can actually say my nut allergy has gotten better.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, and see, so much, it's like when you get the answers to things about why you're going through things, it makes it so much more simple to deal with things, because you know why you're going, or what lesson you're supposed to learn from this, Now, also, we'll always ask, it never hurts to ask him, I'll say, can you do a healing of my client? And over the last few years, I've had 2 times when they actually got physical healings, like almost immediately. One immediately, and the other one within a few days. But most of the time, they'll say, well, we're going to go into your body, we're going to begin a healing that will take effect when you do the work that you need to do.
Yeah, it's a lot of this. You have to work with the mental mind to say that I can have healing.
Yeah. You know, so
It's a belief
anyway, that's
system.
that could be actually considered a separate station, but I usually do that at this when they're talking to the council. It's just a way so I don't, we do it in an orderly manner. So then the next thing on the third station, which is a huge one, is we'll ask is now they can go talk to their soul group. Because what we just discovered in our research is that when you die and you go to the other side, you hang around with familiar souls, you know, a lot of the
Mhm.
time. And there's the soul group, but then there's a lot of subgroups. There's like people like in your life now, you have friends that you see once every 5 years, that are close to you, but you only see them once in a while. But they're still part of who you like to see, part of your thing. There's some people you see almost every day,
Yeah.
or close. So, just because they're in a soul group doesn't mean they're any less important or not as close to you. It just is the way, the way that it works out.
Mhm.
Um, so the clients have pre-prepared questions, and I tell my clients, especially write down the people you want to talk to that you have issues with. I tell them to write down the good, the bad, and the difficult. I used to say the good, the bad, and the ugly, but we don't want to categorize that. Just the good, the bad, and the difficult. And you can talk to people that have passed on if you had difficulty with them and get more
Clarity on why.
clarity on why. Right. Yeah. But the biggest thing is you can talk to the higher selves of people that are still alive in your life now. So if, for instance, if a spouse is having trouble with one of the spouses, she can just say, "What the heck, sweetheart? Why are we doing this? What do I need to do in this situation? To make the situation better?
Mhm.
Why is your lower self, butting heads with me this way? And um, you get a lot of information. You get a lot of information that way that makes it easier when you come back to deal with that person.
Mhm.
Sometimes, like the client I've mentioned a few times on the show, Natasha, over the years that we've been doing this together. But it's a classic, and it says it so simply. One of my clients is a nurse, and she had 3 doctors that rotated during the week. And one of the doctors, when it came in, was so cruel to her emotionally that she would have
Mhm.
panic attacks before she would go into work, knowing he was going to be there. And
Yeah.
he always did it where nobody could see, and so she couldn't complain to human resources or something. But it affected her so much because she didn't really even know the doctor, but he was so cruel to her emotionally, and she just doesn't understand. It doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
So when she was before the council, she asked the council, she said, "Why is this doctor so cruel to me?" And they said one sentence to her, and then they moved on. They said, "You were very cruel to him in another lifetime." you know and oh boy, you should see her. She's in trance, and she grimaced like, "Ugh, ugh," you know and we talked about it after her session, and she says, "I know when they told me that, I didn't want to believe that I would be the type of person that would have been cruel to anybody, because I'm not that way in this lifetime." And I
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, but you weren't always the angel that you're on this lifetime. You had some,
We all had to be somebody in
we all
other
had to be
lifetimes.
somebody, right?" So but the good thing about that was her hearing that and her integrating that and thinking about that. When I talked to her months later, she said it was a funny thing, because after she had her session, he's never been that way to her again. She says, it's like I'm invisible to him. And so I think
Mm.
what happened, she had that realization, and so she took the target off her back, you
Yeah.
know that says, that. So people
That's
get
that's where I use the mantra a lot of times when I'm having a struggle with somebody. I'm asking for healing on this. Or I
mhm.
like to put in, I'm asking for divine healing on this. And it's not necessarily divine like in a feminine, it's divine in the sense of pure. I'm asking for pure
Yeah.
healing on this because there's some conflict that I don't understand. And I would like some support in healing this so that I can take the target off my back, or I can take the target off of this
Yeah.
situation. And
Yeah.
it usually does help.
Well, it helps too. Like sometimes people have had parents that have not been the best parents to have. And when they
Hmm.
talk to their, I'm thinking of a client whose father had passed on, and he was never the kind of emotional kind of guy that would ever say he loved her, or never hold her and give her nurturing that way. But he just thought his role of being the father was just to provide, make sure that they get to school, and keep them out of trouble. But she never had that warmth from her father. Well, she
Hmm.
found out on the other side that she had agreed with her, who this soul that was going to come down and play the part of her father was going to come down and be that way to her, because that was going to trigger her to have to be more of a self-reliant person, to be able to set boundaries, to have to really work on on herself. And after the session, she realized, wow, that's my father being that way. That's who I've become. I've actually, become a very strong woman. I've become a very compassionate person, and it wouldn't have happened unless she'd had to learn from the way her father was treating her,
Yes.
that way. So, you get a lot of stuff like that. So, the fourth place to go to is a place most people have heard of before. And Natasha, how do you pronounce it? I call them like Akashic records.
Akashic.
Akashic. Okay, let's call it Akashic. That's probably better. There's a place over there. We call it the library, and we call it's like station number 4. And it's a place if somebody wants to visit, they can. They mostly do it out of curiosity. And the ones that I've had to go there, there's usually like a librarian there. It's a teacher, a master in charge of that. And if you sit there, and when I always ask people, what does it look like? And most of the time I get like almost the same picture in my mind that people are talking about. So it seems to be a place. Sometimes they're standing there and they look, it's like there's records or books that go up and you can't even see where it ends. It just kind of goes way up, like in a big old fashioned library, like. And what my clients have done, sometimes they'll sit them down in a chair and they'll put a book before them, and my client will be turning the pages. Now, I'll say, what are you seeing? And they'll say, I'm seeing my past lives,
Yeah.
and then I'll have their human self try to, well, what are you actually seeing? And they'll go, well, the pages is just light. I'm not sure, but he says, I think I'm seeing this on some level, but their physical self generally, when they've done that, is not filtered down to that,
Yeah.
but they do feel that they're seeing it on a spiritual level or something like that.
Yes.
So that's a place of curiosity for some people, and it's kind of a fun experience to have that memory of that experience, that way. And the fifth place is, it would be like these I call them wisdom temples, but they're places where people in the human state go to in the dream state for inspiration for things. In meditation, people find themselves there to get inspiration for things or to get solutions to problems, things in that. If my clients have a hobby, like they're an artist or a dancer or a musician or whatever, I always ask for permission for them to go to a wisdom temple to see how they can get inspiration in their life for what their craft is or what their thing is. And it's a fun part of the session, because the ones that are popping out right away was I had when people that paint and people that are artists go there. I'm thinking of the one where she's standing there and I said, well, tell me she was in this room and there were all these other souls that were painting stuff. And I said, well, go over and look and see what they're painting, And one person was painting these like Chinese characters, they look like Chinese writing and stuff like that. And I said, well, ask her if you can try. And she says, okay. So she's there with a palette of her own. She's trying to write these, and she goes, wow, I'm writing all these characters. And I says, well, what does it mean? She goes, I don't know. her human self was going, I don't know, but I'm doing it. She could see herself. But then the teacher came up to her and said, if you want to improve, we know how you're painting and everything. He says, the one thing that's holding you back is that you're forgetting to paint as if you're a child. They said, you have to not be so technical. You said every time you're overly technical, you're taking away from the spiritual essence of your painting. When it's coming more from your heart, and your painting as you're painting, and you've got the feeling in there that your painting is going to be much better and you're going to be much happier with it. And people that see it, it'll affect them a lot more, So that happened to 2 of my clients, and both of them said afterwards, yeah, she says, I've gotten so technical that I've got to do this style and it's got to be this way, that it takes them out of the creating, part
Yes.
there. So anybody listening now, if you're an artist, that's good. I think good for anybody that's an artist is learn to paint. They said children are that way when they just
They just
paint,
put it down on it and they
yeah.
just go for it.
And and sometimes they don't like when they bring stuff home from school, and it's just coming from that way. And it doesn't, to them, it's a beautiful little piece of art that they made because it came right from them, I like that. So, the other one I had was recently, did I talk about this? I might have talked about this a few weeks ago, but it was a drummer. Did I talk about that? Well,
I'm not too
okay.
sure.
He's a nurse, but his life is music. Okay. But he's a nurse because that's what pays the bills, so he's arranged it where he gets to work in the hospital 3 days a week, 10-hour days. So he gets his 30 hours in, and the other 4 days he can do whatever he wants. And he's in a band right now that's very, very popular on the East Coast, and they're getting a lot of these important gigs at conventions and these big nightclubs and things. And he loves playing, but he asked I said, to the council, then I said, can my client go to a place of inspiration for being a drummer? They said yes. Boom, instantly he's in this hall, and he's all of a sudden he's in trance, and he's going like this, like what's happening? And he goes, the noise because he was witnessing at least 100 different souls that were in there playing percussion instruments, and they were all different sounds, all different stuff, and the noise of it he was going, oh, and then he adjusted to that. And then he calmed down, and I said, well, tell me what's happening. And he says, wow, they're like, this person over here is playing like an ancient kind of African drum or something. And then this person over here is playing, wow, like a modern, like he does, the modern drums. And then people were hitting, I forget how you describe all these instruments. So now it's confusing me because I thought, well, if they're creating music and stuff and everybody's doing that together, that's got to be crazy. And he says, no, as they're playing, each person is feeling the music or feeling whatever they need for their instrument. So it's not interfering with, because in heaven, you can do that,
Yeah,
everybody's hearing the music they need to hear, So then I said, is there a teacher here that teaches drumming? And they said, yeah. So then the drummer master teaches up, and he's got these lightsaber drumsticks. He's holding like these little lightsaber drumsticks in his hands, and he gives them to my. I said, well, and then my client says, oh, he's handing them to me, and I says, how does it feel, and he's going, woo, these feel really good. And then then I said, ask them, how can you be the best drummer you can be from a spiritual standpoint? And they said, when you're playing, it says, just picture water, how water flows. Like if you're seeing everywhere you see water, it just flows. You know how seamlessly it just flows. It just blends to everything. And it's just, it just forms, like blends and molds to everything instantly like that. It says, just have that picture in your mind. And then the other teacher was there, took the drumsticks from him and said, come here. So he went over there, and the teacher infused in his left arm one of those drumsticks in his arm,
cool.
And then infused the other one in his other arm. After the session, I can't tell you how jazzed he was. He says, I cannot wait to go play this next thing, that way. So that's how beautiful it is over there. They're there to help you, to inspire you to be the best you can be, that way. So
I know I try to tap into it as much as I can through this physical body that I'm in, because it is inspirational, and it's just so cool when you have that moment.
It is. Well, when I had my session, they took me to, because I wanted to know how to write music, and so in my session, when I spent the 3 hours over there, my guide Rebazar took me to a place, and he gave me a mental picture to envision that when I would think of that image that what he did, that would open me up to like kind of put me back in this place. What he did is I was standing on a platform like a performer would. The room, it wasn't real big. It was like maybe 40 by 40. There was nobody in there, but I was on stage, And he said, when you want to create music, he says, do this. And he came next to me, and he had a fishing pole with a bunch of hooks on it. And he goes like this. He goes, watch this. And he goes out into the audience. and then he pulled it back, and each one of the hooks had a musical note on it,
Oh,
Isn't
cool.
that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he said, if you just think of that anchor, think of that vision, and that'll open you up to spiritually to put you in this place for being inspired. So I think I mentioned, I did 18 songs on a CD, and I got my first royalty check a while back. And yeah, there's no money in it, people, that's for sure. Like a few of my songs, they played like 22,000 times. Someone listened to them, it wasn't one person listened 22,000, but overall. And I
Yeah.
think I made like $93 or something. So unless you can get, like these big artists to get millions and millions of views, there's not really that much money in that nowadays. So that just gives you an idea of how beautiful it is over there, how they will, let you go to a place and see that, yes, this is how you get inspired. This is how you keep from getting, writer's block and that.
Well, I was just thinking that like, what's my next step? Take the fishing line and bring it back in and let the universe, even though
Yes.
you don't know what you're bringing back in because of not, if you don't see visions and that kind of stuff, you don't know what's coming back in, but at least you can bring it towards you. So then your life lays it out for you.
Yeah. So
that's what I just got out of that story. So
yeah, no, so that might be an anchor. Maybe some other people can try that, because now I was lucky when I was in my 30s. I was a comedian for 30 years, and I would write custom comedy shows for corporations. And as a ventriloquist, we would do a roast of the people in the company and their product and everything, to try to teach through humor, try to poke. The bosses would say, just tear us apart. Come on, let's see what silly things we have that we're doing here. And it was pretty stressful because they'd pay me a lot of money because I'd write a whole routine about their thing, and then I'd have to go perform. So I was lucky in the dream state. One time I found myself like out of my body, and Rebazar, who ends up being the same guy that many years later when I went to the afterlife, that was him. He was there, but I was seeing him. It was more real even, But in this vision or dream that I had, Rebazar, I was in a cave. You know how I'm thinking of Yosemite, and they have that granite, big dome, and it's just it goes up maybe 1,500 feet, just a dome. It was like we were half up that, but we were in a cave there, so we were looking out down in the valley. And he had me. I was in this room, and actually there was a bunch of dwarfs that came in, and they all had gifts for me, and they stacked them up on this table. So I realized that Spirit was giving me some gifts, And then Rebazar says, "Come here," and he took me over, and we were looking out this cave, looking down at the valley. And he says, when you want inspiration for comedy, remember this scene. And when I looked out down at the valley, I saw like, I don't know, 50 or 60 of those like hot air balloons, and they were just floating all over, and the colors were so beautiful and everything was so smooth. Now, for whatever reason, he says, when you want to write comedy, picture the scene, and just seeing that it was kind of like Willy Wonka kind of balloons, kind of thing, like happy and joyful and peaceful and everything like that. So I wrote that down in my journal. This was back when I was in my 30s, I guess. And I swear, every time I had to write, even if someone, I had this one company called and says, look, our guy fell out. We have a conference in 3 days. I need someone to do this. Can you write a show and be there in 3 days? And I said, yeah. And then I get off the phone and go, what am I thinking? Because it would take me weeks. But then I remembered that scene. I would start down and start writing. And for dozens and dozens of shows I did after that, I never got writer's block. Things just flowed. And I couldn't believe it. I'd go and I'd do the presentation, and people are laughing like crazy. And I'm thinking, thank you. So that's the place of inspiration. I know we only have 5 minutes, but
I hear you.
The other two stations, we can talk more about them in another thing, but one is a place of recreation. And sometimes my clients, they get their work done pretty soon, and she still has some energy. And I'll say, well, hey, just for fun, while you're over here in Disneyland and the afterlife, in a sense, you want to see what souls do here for fun, and they go, yeah. So I just remember two individual. One was like, these souls that were playing tag, and they're these. Each soul is they're like a ball of we're a ball of colored energy over there, and they were like whizzing by each other, trying to touch each other, like
Mm-hmm.
this. And every once in a while, when my client was in trance, and every once in a while he'd go woo like this, And so I said, "What happened?" He says, I just got one, like woo." And it was like really an exhilarating feeling, as
Yes.
like tag, you're it or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
another one, they were like, was like basketball, but they were these souls, but they were in soul energy themselves, but they had these little balls of energy that they had, which was like basketballs or something. And they were having to pass each other and make and hoops and things. And so, just not playing harps over there, like everybody thinks,
Yeah.
like, what do you do? Just sit around. But that's another thing too. We can talk on another show about all the dozens of things we found out that souls do behind the scenes, what their jobs are in heaven, because
Yeah.
you don't just go there and sit around. You'll take up another job or something you can do that helps humanity, behind the scenes.
Exactly.
hmm
Exactly.
You know,
Our schools
and
are always busy.
always busy. And matter of fact, the other thing which we could talk about for some time, but maybe we'll do it another show, and that's the seventh thing is the place of life selection, where people can actually see how they chose this life that they're in. They go back to that memory about sitting there and seeing the different choices they had of who they could be and what they could be, and then how they decided that, yeah, I'm going to be Natasha. I'm going to go
Yep.
down. I'm going to be this medium, and this is how I'm going to help people. Or me going, I'm going to be this weird clown guy that's going to go down and be a comedian for years, and then all of a sudden help people visit the afterlife. And about
Exactly.
what type of parents you're going to have, what you wanted to learn, and everything. So we can
Yeah,
talk
because
more about that another
I
time.
remember looking through a book and said, yeah, I want to do that. No, I don't want that
Okay.
this time. And it
Yeah.
would be like the book of my lives that I've had,
Yeah.
that I got a chance to say, yeah, I like that, and then here's some new ideas. And it was kind of an interesting book to say how, well, like in one book, the one page, there was like, okay, how do you want to do this? And well, I've been poisoned and killed so many lifetimes. I don't want to. I want to be very stringent about what I eat this lifetime.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to go down my throat that I don't choose. Well, it's taken me a long time to get through some food situations that I've been through, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll finish it by saying that, like when someone comes to you, they get more pictures to their puzzle, and that
Uh-huh.
helps them to live their life better. And when they come to me and I help them to visit the afterlife, they get a lot of pieces to their puzzle. So it's like you and I are just doing the same thing, but just with a different modality, of
Yeah.
helping people to do that.
Yes.
And it's something that we both love to do. We know it's our calling, you know. Uh, I'll talk in another story about another time when I'm on, maybe about how I found out that doing this work is what I came down here to do, and
Mm-hmm.
how that makes my life so wonderful, because I just do the work because I know that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't second guess it. The
Well,
people that
you've
are,
been wanting to help people your whole lifetime.
yeah,
That's how you did comedy, because you wanted them
right,
to smile more. That's how
yeah,
you became a father, because you wanted to help. It's like you've
yeah,
had this theme for a very long time, that you're down here to help people.
yeah. So if people have any questions about this, my website, it's right in front of me there. Visit
Visit.
theafterlife.com. There's a lot of videos on there. There's questions, frequently asked questions and answered. You can actually see a young lady going through the process on there. But you hear Michael Newton talking. There's also a page in there about past life regression, and there's stuff with some people that were on Oprah, talking about that. And anybody that listens to your show, Natasha, it gets us. I'm happy to give away my book, an ebook version of Reincarnation is Real, which is about all the current research being done around the world now on reincarnation. And there's tons and tons and tons of it. I mean, so many things that I think if anybody just did a little research and read even 10 of the things that are out there, they'll probably never say again, oh, that's not true. They would say, wow, this is very interesting at the
Mhm.
least, that way. But it doesn't matter, whether people believe that they lived before or not. The main thing is who you are now at this point in time and how
Exactly.
you live
In
your
this
life.
physical body, in this reality, in
This
this
is where you're at
knowing of
now.
who we are and what we're doing.
Yeah.
Even if I know that I've have other lifetimes that I'm doing other things, in this physical body, in this physical knowing that
This is
I'm in
it.
right now.
And that's what they told me over there. When the second time I went over there, they said, I said, why are you allowing this to happen? This is so cool, that you're opening a portal so the average person can go over there and find out what their mission is and why they were born, and they can discover that they're never alone and everything. But that's what they said to me. They said, with the times being as crazy as they are now, I'm paraphrasing, but because I don't remember the exact words, but what I got from it was times are changing like crazy right now, and they want people to really be focused on what they came down here to do, because it
Yes.
all had to do with love and light. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And some people have gotten off track a little bit, and we need everybody to really be doing the best they can do to be giving light to the world,
Yes.
not darkness. Okay. And they said, and also at the same time, they'll come back from the experience knowing that the afterlife is real. Okay. They won't question that again. And also knowing that they're never alone, that there's, that they have a whole team up there, their guides, their loved ones, their other soul group people that are rooting for them, get through the
Exactly. All we have to do is
obstacles.
really ask, can you
Yeah.
help me? Can you show me the way? And then
Yeah.
we have to open our eyes and see billboards, phone calls,
Yeah.
conversations around us, animals that cross in front of us, whatever it may be. I have Crow that's been really talking to me lately.
That would be a good thing to do in another show again too, is to talk about these God sightings, as we call them,
Yeah,
and to see how they're real. And it's one way that they get in touch with us down here, is
exactly.
by these things that we think are kind of strange. But when it happens to you, that's not a coincidence, that's something
Exactly.
that someone's trying to get your attention.
Exactly. It's kind of like I gave a message to a coworker and he goes, "Yeah, I'm just looking for a miracle." And I said, do you think maybe what I just told you could have been a miracle for you?
Yeah.
What are you waiting for? Another ship to go by? And that's what the universe does sometimes, is it gives us something, and but we're like with
There's
it.
a book. I
We
wish
don't
I
really pay attention. It's right over our heads. And thank you everyone for saying this was an amazing show. I'm so grateful that we can be here to support you.
Yeah, I mean, we're down here, each of us, to help each other, and one more thing I'll tell you, that when I was in the afterlife a second time, one thing I heard from Michael Newton, who showed up when I was there, and the council, and they were saying that what they want us to be aware of is that everybody's at their own level of spiritual understanding. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us may some of us may be in senior class, and some might be in junior, and some are still in grade school. It doesn't matter. There's no, we were all at one level at one time or another. But what we should be doing is looking at the people who are in our life and how we can influence them in a loving way to take their next step, whatever that is. Even if it's someone just needs to learn mindfulness, or someone needs to learn meditation or learn to pray or to find a spiritual teaching that resonates with them, read a book about self-improvement, it's whatever that next step is. And so never judge another person or where they're at, because we're all in the soup together. So we should just I picture it this way. I got this vision one time. It's like I'm having difficulty with something, and I look up this ladder that I'm climbing, and someone, and smiling, reaches down and gives me a hand. It's pulling me up to the next rung. And
Yeah.
then that person that just did that looks at me and goes, hey, you, look below you, and you look down, and there's someone that's that rung just below you. And it's up to me now to reach down and to pull them up a rung, and as long as we're doing
Exactly.
that, like in relationships, both husbands and wives, you should be there all the time. How can I help you? How can I help you? That way,
Well, everybody's weakness, like my weakness, is usually my husband's strengths, and my husband's strengths are usually my weak. It's like, we all have
Yeah.
weaknesses and strengths, and how can we support each other? But we have judgment and anger and old stories that get in the way. And
Yeah.
I know you need to get going, but
Well, I was just going to say, how would people get a hold of you when you want to tell through intuitiveclarifications.com.
Yes, I would love to support people. I've really understood the 3D body and how are we being held back by our stories, like me healing my nut allergy from something that happened, 10, 15 years ago. It's like, how do we go in and heal this part of us so that we can see the bigger picture, to see the bigger vision, to walk the bigger vision, to be where we're at. And I'm just so grateful to be able to help those that I have, and I'm really wanting to help more.
Yeah.
Intuitive clarifications with Natasha, and I've actually lowered my prices just a little bit for my hour session and my bundle sessions, just because life is so uncertain right now, and I just felt the call to be in alignment what I felt like was my price to pay, to charge.
Well, that's good. Well, as people know, I mean, we have bills to pay and stuff. But I mean, during the year, I'd say probably about a fourth of the sessions I do, or I don't charge for. There's people I run into that I know need to help, and or they come to me in a certain way, and I just go, okay, God, I'm just supposed to help them.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of thing like that.
So how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, visit theafterlife.com. There's a contact page on there. There's phone numbers. People can even call or text or whatever. And there's no hurry in this. I do a free phone consultation with people to kind of hear their story, and then they kind of say, okay, this is what we could probably do in a session and everything. There's no charge for that. I had someone just booked a session I talked to 3.5 years ago. And she finally called up and she goes, remember me? And I go, no, because I talked to so many people. But then when I went back to my notes from way back and I saw what we talked about, and she said, it's just taken me a while to get ready. And says, now it's time. It's time for me to have this experience, But even just knowing that this is possible, and some people don't need to go to the afterlife if they just hear enough people say, hey, I've been there. It's real. Just
exactly.
Like some people have been to Disneyland and they know it's real, and other people have only heard about it, but they believe that there is one because people have been there and talked about it
enough times. Exactly. And Kim just said, thank you, Regan. I could listen to you for hours, and so much information. And it's nice to meet you too, Nick. Thank you very much for being here. And Nick, you just came to the end of the show, so I apologize if you haven't been here.
Well, he can listen to the whole thing in a few days or whenever you put it.
No, actually, as it's loaded up now, so as soon as I finish up with the show, you can rewatch it on YouTube. For whenever you want, and I have other videos that I post daily. The only ones I don't post is like on Friday night and Saturday night, but I post daily for inspirational. I just want to bring light and love to this planet that's hurting so much right now.
Well, and people that watch this and some of your other podcasts, just be sure to share it. It's time that when you see something that uplifts you, and you'll know people in your life, you go, I think my friend needs to listen to this, or I think my friend would benefit from it. Feel free to just share the video, send the link to other people.
Exactly. And that's the thing is that everything is shareable, and would love to share this light and love message. I've had others, like I did like 2 shows ago, I think I talked about a lot of my healing that I was doing through, and my story was about my sexual abuse that I've had in my life, and how to heal from that, and how I've been working through it and bringing it forward, and that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of trauma that we have in this world, and it's like all we can do is really look at it, see what it is, and send it to the side so we can walk forward past it sometimes.
And that's so brave and good of you to share that experience, because this is something that's so hush and people feel so much guilt or shame or embarrassment or that. But the more we just talk about it openly, the easier it can be healed. And on my website too, I do have traditional hypnotherapy that I do have a practice also, and I specialize in PTSD, which is mostly women that have rape, incest, or awful things that have been done to them, and they're like this, and there's some modalities even without the spiritual modality. The spiritual side is the best, but for regular modalities, you see on my website, if you go traditional hypnotherapy, and you can see some videos of some things that work magic to help people get a semblance of normalcy back in their life, you know, even after the
Exactly.
worst stuff. And that's
Exactly.
so good that you've becoming healed, Natasha, and you know, I've becoming healed from a lot of things. So then we're not bogged down by those things anymore, you know, and
Exactly.
we can get on to being who we really want to be, you know. So happy to
Exactly.
help.
No,
So I'll
I
say goodbye. I'll get back to the conference here now.
yes, and
And
give your wonderful, wonderful wife
uh,
just very much of a loving hug from me.
I will,
I love
Natasha.
her so much, and we need to have her on the show and talk about manifesting.
Oh, yes. And that's
We
what
did.
we're
I
here.
did a couple years ago. It's time to get her back on again.
She's amazing, you know. And we're learning today too about speech with neuro linguistic programming, you know, here. But it's how to not to manipulate anybody, but how to talk most effectively, you know, to say that because of the way we speak can if you want to influence people, you want to help them, and the words that you use are so important, you know, and how you do that, you know, and how you get them to help themselves and stuff too. So we're learning all that this weekend. So,
Yes.
all right. I will see you in next month then. Okay.
Yes, the third Wednesday of every month, Regan
Yeah.
tries to be on. If not, we try to move it around a little bit so it
Yeah.
fits his life and my life.
Yeah.
Blessings all to
Okay.
everyone, and thank you for being here. Please like, share, and follow if you haven't followed before. And you know, I be at peace with what you are, because we're all meant to be different, but yet we're all meant to be light, and it's time for us to shine our light.
Yes.
Blessings,
Go
everyone.
shine. Okay.
Bye now.
Bye now. Bye, Natasha.
Bye.